Hello everybody, this is Connor at BoatsDon'tSink here with another Shadowverse Evolve deck profile, looking at the last class we haven't covered for BP03 yet. This is going to be Midrange Abyss. First off, what is a mid-range deck? For those not familiar with the term, commonly used in other trading card games, Magic the Gathering in particular, kind of where it originated. It's usually used to describe a deck along the sort of aggro to control spectrum that's going to fall a little bit closer to the control side, but still features more aggro elements than a normal control deck would. It's usually going to look like something with a lot of sort of big, heavier creatures, in Magic's case, followers here, that are going to have control-related effects, while also trying to stick on the board and pressure the opponent at the same time. This is usually kind of the opposite side of what you might see in a tempo deck, where you're still going to have those control elements, but instead of being on bigger, stickier creatures in a slower deck, tempo decks are going to focus more on sort of aggressive cards that have slight control elements to them that prevent your opponent from responding to those aggressive creatures. And today, obviously, we're going to be looking at a mid-range deck. Abyss as a class has a lot of just really good, like 4, 5, 6 drops that are kind of sticky on the board and have good fanfare effects alongside them. So here we go, jumping into that mid-range deck. As a reminder before we look at the list, as always, this is meant to be a starting point to work off of and is definitely not fully optimized for any specific meta. You should test it for yourself, make any changes that you find necessary. I've got a lot of alternative options to look at the end of this list. So try it out for yourself and adjust as you feel necessary. Abyss is a class that, looking through sort of tournament data results from Japan during this meta, and just anything else I could find, there's not a whole lot of testing been done for it. I think, unfortunately, Abyss is kind of widely regarded during this time frame of the game as probably the worst class next to Rune. And unfortunately, as a result of that, there's just not a whole lot to work off of. So this is what I've managed to put together from mainly some of my locals testing. I haven't gotten to look at it a whole lot yet myself. So here's the list. You can see, compared to a lot of the other lists I've posted, it is pretty heavy in terms of play point cost on a lot of the followers here. We still have a lot of 2-drops. So our turn 2 and 3, we should have a lot of options anyway. But we're not going to be able to start playing multiple cards, most likely, for a while. Our game plan is kind of just to transition into, turn 4, turn 5, turn 6, playing just one big threat a turn. And hoping that that can get us there and just kind of overpower our opponent with big cards. You can check out the deck log page for the deck, obviously, as always, using the code in the bottom right. That's going to be HT8R for this deck. We've got our Evolve deck here. Pretty typical, just like 2 copies of most of our Evolves, 1 Bellringer, 1 Azazel, and we're playing 2 Carrots here. We do have a decent number of Uma Musume followers, but one of them does have its own Evolve, Maruzensky, so we're mainly just playing the Carrots for Fine Emotion, which we'll look at when we get there. As I said, curve's kind of high. We're only playing 24 cards that cost 3 or less. I do usually like that number to be closer to like 28, 29, 30. So 24 is a bit low for my liking, but I know a lot of other people might have different preferences on that. We do have cards going all the way up to 7 at pretty much every point along the cost line. 32 followers, 8 spells, 6 of those are removal, 2 of them are recursion, one of my favorite cards actually. But yeah, so without anything else to be said, look at the first card we got here. Obviously, it's Bellringer. No real surprises here. Abyss, as I've said, most of its big threats are at the higher points of the mana curve, so if you're not playing an aggro deck, you kind of just need something to stall out the game until you get there, dig you toward your pieces. Bellringer is the perfect card for that. It's going to be ward, so it's going to help us save our leader defense early in the game. It draws us a card on last words, so it's going to keep digging for pieces for us, keep replenishing our hand. And it's a card that we kind of just want to die early, which is going to go to our cemetery and help fuel our Necro Charge effect, which we have a number of cards that either have Necro Charge, which counts the number of cards in our cemetery, or have effects that just want us to have options in our cemetery. Bellringer, of course, does evolve as well for 2 play points. On evolve, you can deal 2 damage to an enemy follower. This kind of just also fits in with our sort of early control theme. We can remove any early followers our opponent plays if we don't have a better turn 2 play. Though, obviously, usually with our like handful of removal spells and followers that we can play on 2, we have 9 followers at 2. Probably not running this out immediately unless we just absolutely have to. Next, we have 3 copies of Demonium Punk Devil. This is definitely one of the best cards that Abyss did get in set 3. It's a 2-cost 2/3 with Ward, which is something the deck desperately wanted, just again to sort of slow down these early games. Activated ability, you can give your leader -2 defense to gain Bane once per turn. The once per turn doesn't really matter, it's mainly just there to prevent you from dumping all of your life at once. Since the Bane is permanent on it anyway. And last words, you get +2 defense on your leader. This card's really cool. You can just play it on turn 2 and let it sit there, since obviously it can't attack anyway. You don't have to pay the 2 life yet. Just leave it there as a 2/3. Your opponent probably can't answer it. If they do, oh well, you gain 2 life. Unless they blacken scripture it, I guess. But if they don't answer it, and they say they attack with some threat of their own, you can gain Bane and just trade, and gain the 2 life back immediately. Or you can attack their face for 2, pay the 2 life to gain Bane on your ward. So if they have to attack into it, it's going to trade with whatever they throw at it. Which, you know, if you play this turn 2, turn 3 you attack them, and then they go to 3. Usually they're playing a 3-cost that evolves on that turn if it's something that can attack your Demonium. Which can be like a Floral Fencer. Obviously like a Dragon Warrior would remove it with effect anyway, but cards like Floral Fencer are just really bad into this because they would trade and you'd gain the 2 life back. So it does disincentivize your opponent from attacking into it early. And the 2 life that you have to pay is barely ever a cost worth caring about because you're gaining it back. And if you don't have to pay for Bane, that's just even better, because then you're gaining 2 life overall, your net +2, which is good, again, for stalling out the early game. We have 3 copies of Seeking the Pearl. This is from Uma Musume. This is just a 2-cost 3/2 at last words. Put the top 2 cards of your deck into your cemetery. This card's already pretty aggressively statted, so it's another just ideal turn 2 play that we can start punching our opponent with. Since one of our win conditions is, in fact, dealing 20 damage to our opponent's leader. But the last words here is pretty important for the deck, putting 2 cards from top of deck into cemetery. We have a pretty good handful of cards that either have Necro Charge effects, as I mentioned, or want us to have cards in cemetery like Death's Breath. So this is an early way to either we deal 3 damage to our opponent, or they remove Seeking the Pearl and we start setting up. And they probably used their whole turn to remove it. Or at least most of their turn, if we went first. If we go second, they're on turn 3. Maybe they use an Angelic Snipe and play a 2-drop. Still not terrible for us. But it helps to get us set up and can start pressuring the opponent. And if it gets to attack before they trade into it, then that's just beautiful for us. Our next card is 3 copies of Spartoy Sergeant. Pretty much the same card as Seeking the Pearl. Our attack and defense stats are flipped, so this is going to deal less damage when it hits, but is more likely to survive the turn 2 removal. Since it's still going to die to some things, but cards like Angelic Snipe, Blazing Breath aren't going to take it out anymore. It's basically going to require either a Surefire Bullet, Blackened Scripture, something like that costs 2 play points, which, again, if our opponent's spending their whole 2 play point turn on removing our 2-drop that already milled us 2, it's great. And again, it helps fuel all the same cards that we're trying to fuel with Seeking the Pearl. The rest of our 2-drops are removal spells. So we have 3 copies of Surefire Bullet, which deals 3 to an enemy follower, 4 if it's evolved at quick timing. 4 is a great number right now. Cards like Floral Fencer, Alice Wonderland Explorer, Alice especially, is in just most of the top tier decks right now. Floral Fencer being in the other pretty widely considered top tier deck. And just any other, 3-drop, 3-cost, 3/3s that evolve into 4/4s. Are just all great targets for Surefire Bullet. Even if you have to against decks like Forest, Crystalia, Lily is a 2/4. That's something you can take out with this. There's plenty of options here. And plenty of unevolved 3 defense followers that you can take out if you have to. Our other removal spell is Undying Resentment. This is also 2-cost, also deals 3 Instead of the potential +1 damage against evolved followers, this one puts the top card of our deck into Cemetery, meaning Undying Resentment itself goes to Cemetery and one additional card from the top, so represents 2 cards in Cemetery. Just helps us fuel more Necro Charge early while keeping our opponent off of our backs. Moving into 3-cost followers, we have Fine Motion. This is a 3-cost 3/3 with a race effect. So we can spend one of our carrots to race Fine Motion. On race, it gets +1/+1, making it a 4/4 that's not evolved, so not going to die to any opposing Surefire bullets. Our leader gains 2 defense and put the top 2 cards of deck into Cemetery. This is basically like the best 3-drop ever for Abyss. It does everything you could want the deck to do. It's gaining you defense early, so you're not taking as many important hits. Or you rather can take more hits because you have more defense to work with. And it's putting 2 cards into your Cemetery, which is, you know, as many as Seeking the Pearl or Spartoy Sergeant. But it's doing more at the same time. It's a 4/4 body. It can start punching in the next turn. Which is just great all around. You really want to see this on turn 3. I guess 4 if you go first, but you want to go second with this deck, really. If it's going to get obvious real quick that you want to go second with this deck for Evo points. So, ideally, turn 3, we're just playing Fine Motion and have a 4/4. Our next 3-drop is one that is, unfortunately, not great on turn 3 or 4, but does get better once we get a little further into the game, or if we just open really fast for some reason. So this is Marzinski, 3-cost 3/3. Fanfare, Necro Charge 10. We give -4/-4 to an enemy follower. 10 is hard to get right when you'd be playing Marzinski. It's basically impossible if you're playing Marzinski on 3, and highly unlikely if you're playing Marzinski on 4. But once you get into like turn 5, turn 6, being able to play Marzinski plus another card, by that point in the game, you can probably get there if you draw enough of your mill effects. 4 on this is pretty cool. It lets you hit things that Surefire Bullet can't that aren't evolved, which is going to be things like Tin Soldier, Magical Fairy Lilac, a handful of other cards. But at the same time, even if -4/-4 isn't removing an enemy follower, giving it -4 attack means that all of a sudden, even a card like Olivia that might be a 5/5 is just not a threat to you anymore. Now it's just hitting you for 1, and you can let it sit there for a minute. You don't really care that much. Later, if you have to, you can use any just like random ping effect to take it out. Which we have a card that does 2 to the board, so that works great with it. Marzinski herself does also evolve for 1 play point. We can get a 4/4 that on evolve gives an additional -2/-2 to an enemy follower on the field. This one does not require Necro Charge. So first thing we can do, you know, if we have to play this on, say, turn 3, turn 4, we can just remove something small with a -2/-2. Or like I said, if your opponent has a 2/3, a 2/4, whatever, even if we're not killing it, we can make it pretty much useless and not able to damage us. Or even just turning a 4/4 into a 2/2 is not terrible. Means that it also can't trade back into Marzinski. We could, you know, turn a Floral Fencer into a 2/2 and then attack it with Marzinski, so we still have a 4/2 that they have to answer. But if you need to, you can stack the -4 and -2 on the same follower to take out 6 defense followers, which there's not a ton of, but by the time you're playing Marzinski for Necro Charge 10, you might have run into them. So this is going to hit things like Wizardess of Oz, Odette, Rico. It also hits like Lævateinn Dragon and Mystic King, which both of those archetypes, while I don't think they're super competitive, have been really popular in terms of sales. So maybe people are playing them. So it gets you a lot of just like random things like that. Overall, good card for like mid-game removal. And it can punch our opponent. Next, we have the 4-drop Cerberus. This is kind of the face of Abyss in terms of just like the best card the class has, and it has been since set 1. This is a 4-cost 3/3. Fanfare, put a Mimi or Coco token into your EX area. If you have Necro Charge 10, you put both instead. So Mimi and Coco are 0-cost spells. Mimi deals 2 damage to an enemy follower. Coco gives a follower on your field +2 attack. This is super important to our overall strategy. One of our ways to win the game. Mimi already is just decent removal. If we can play our 4 cost and then also shoot something for 2, then that's fine. Evolving Cerberus for 2 evolves into a 5/5, which is a pretty great stat line for the card to have. Obviously, 5 defense still dies to things, but it's a big stat upgrade from 3/3 and gives us an additional Mimi and Coco. So any turn where we can play Cerberus and immediately evolve it, we have 4 damage of removal just to instantly spread either 4 into 1 follower or 2 into 2 followers. But the Cocos are kind of actually what we want out of this. The threat of being able to give any follower +2 attack on any of our turns is one of the things that makes this deck so strong, I think. It means that your opponent could just get chunked for half of their total life at any random point if one of our followers sticks around and can attack. You know, even if Cerberus, right, we play Cerberus and evolve it, and say we use the Mimis to remove whatever they have, and just pass with Cerberus not engaged. If they can't find a way to remove Cerberus, they're taking 9 damage on the next turn, which is, you know, that is almost half their total life, and they've probably taken a hit prior to that. So it can be really threatening, but it is even more threatening when you look at a combo we have higher up on our curve that we'll take a look at last, that can basically just end our opponent instantly. Soul Dealer. This card really good out of set 2. I think it is getting slightly worse just right now in particular, but still worth playing. There is one alternative I consider that we'll talk about at the end. But this is a 4-cost 6/5, which is already just an insane stat line. If you just jam this on turn 4, your opponent kind of has to answer it, and if they can't, you're going to start killing them. Fanfare, you deal 3 to your own leader, which is the downside of him being so giant. But hopefully not really something that's going to matter a whole ton. He also has Ward, so once he starts attacking the opponent for huge chunks of damage, he's also defending you, which can help make up for the fact that you have to take 3 damage on Fanfare. But evolving for 2 gives us a 7/6, which chunks even harder. 6 defense, super relevant, survives Humpty Dumpty, which only card in our deck so far that we've looked at that does survive Humpty Dumpty. And on evolve, we can destroy an enemy follower, and our leader gets +X defense, where X is the destroyed follower's attack. So this, you know, as long as we're hitting something that has 3 or more attack, we're basically going defense neutral on taking the 3 on play and then evolving. If we're able to hit something that has 5 defense or 5 attack, 6 attack, 7 attack, we can start gaining defense off of that, which is great. Unfortunately, in the current meta, I think most of the things, outside of Dragon, most of the things that you might be wanting to hit with that are just either have Aura or don't have that much attack anyway. You look at decks like Haven, right? And their followers, like if you hit an evolved Alice, you gain 1. If you hit Opinion Prince is probably your best case scenario. You can gain 2 off an evolved one, but you still only gain 1 off of the unevolved. Humpty Dumpty himself is probably never going to be on board, and Tin Soldiers only breaking you even. And a lot of times they're just clearing their own board anyway, so like what is Soul Dealer doing? Forest, Beauty and the Beast has Aura. But there are still going to be times where you catch cards sitting on the board. You catch a Crystalia Eve, you catch Opinion Prince, you catch you catch an Odette, gains you a decent bit of life, but it's going to gain your opponent life too. So this card is really more here for his stat line and ward than the destroy effect. I think it's an effect that's gotten a little worse over the last couple sets, but could get significantly better moving forward into the future, just depending on how the meta pans out. Overall, still a good card though, and 7 attack is relevant for the combo that we'll look at later. Next we have Dark Angel Olivia. This is probably the most, like, just cuttable slot in the deck, I think. You can kind of use this if there's other cards you want extra copies of or whatever. This is just part of kind of our toolboxy Death's Breath package. But I do think her effects are relevant for the deck. 5 cost 5/5. Fanfare, choose up to 2. Either gain an evolution point, gain 3 defense, draw a card, or each opponent discards a card. If our goal is to stick threats on board to punch the opponent with while controlling their stuff, this is kind of just the best thing you could be doing. Simply for the fact that, like, playing a 5/5 that gains you 3 defense and makes your opponent discard a card makes it a lot harder for them to either kill you or answer your board because they're losing resources. You can also choose to draw a card if you don't need the defense, which can help dig you into more ways to win the game. Evolution point is probably the least important part here. Even though I say that this deck wants to go second, by the time you're at 5 play points, getting the evolution point means a lot less. You really want that evolution point for turns 2, 3, 4, 5. So I don't think evolution point is something you'll be picking super often, though there will surely be scenarios where it comes up. Next we have Odile Black Swan. This is a 5-cost 6/4. Again, hitting the 6 attack mark, which is our important combo mark. Fanfare, deal 2 damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field. Necro charge 20, gain Storm. 20 is a really hard number to hit. This is pretty much just in here for 2 to the board, 2 to the opponent's face. If we do have Necro charge 20, though, it can just kill our opponent handily, very handily. It is actually the only thing that can, like, outright kill our opponent without Cerberus's spells pumping after we evolve Azazel, so it's good for that, but Necro 20 is hard, I promise. It's very hard. Most of your games aren't going to go long enough for that. But still, this is good at clearing the board. It's going to clear, like, small token boards for sure, which against a deck like Forest is probably really good. Even a deck like Sword might have a lot of X2s sitting around, either like Floral Fencer tokens or an unevolved Amaro or anything like that. And it does 2 to our opponent's face. And if they don't answer it, if they don't answer our 6/4, they're just probably dying on the next turn, or a couple turns later, because we can hit them for 6 and 2 more to their face on strike the next turn. Also 2 to their board again the next turn. So it's kind of just a, like, have to answer immediately card when it hits the board. Another 6 attack here. We have at 6 cost. 6 cost 6/6. Dark Alice. This is probably our most consistent way to kill people. This card has Rush. Strike. Each opponent discards a card. So another kind of just way to keep our opponent's hand smaller, make it harder for them to answer our cards. And Rush lets us, trade into something on board. Or maybe, hopefully not trade, but hopefully be able to attack and remove something while still surviving. 6 defense is thankfully a lot. Last Words. This is kind of what makes this card so insane. You can banish the top 10 cards of your deck to return this to the field, and then discard a card. Banishing 10 is hefty. We're already milling a lot to try to get our Necro Charge effects, so you probably cannot do this more than once per game. Maybe twice, but probably just once. So you need to make this count when you use it. But if you play Dark Alice on 6, and, say you swing at like a 4/4 or whatever to get rid of it, you make your opponent discard a card. If they destroy your Dark Alice on their turn, this Last Words will trigger and bring the Dark Alice back on their turn. Which means that when you move to your next turn, it can attack, since it was there at the beginning of the turn. That's kind of just why this card is so insane. It's going to let us get in for 6, but because it costs 6, we can play Azazel the next turn, Azazel, which, if we have Evo point, another reason we want to go second, or if we have Necro Charge 10, which makes them cost 4, we can set our opponent's life to 10 and kill them with 2 Cerberus pumps on Dark Alice, since it's basically impossible for them to... it's not impossible for them to remove her. Hard removal, like banish removal, top deck removal, bottom deck removal, stuff like that still gets rid of her. But they have to... Just destroying her isn't enough. The Last Words will trigger and we still get to attack. So it lets us set up a combo kill there. So that's kind of just why this is here. It's forces cards out of our opponent's hand. Worst case scenario, you can just play this and try to rip your opponent down to 0 cards. If you go like Olivia turn 5, this turn 6. So still lots of options. Next 6-drop we have, also a 6/6, still a good stat line. We have Riko Kashimoto. This is Rush, again, and Strike. If there are no other followers on your field, select an enemy follower, destroy it, deal 3 damage to its leader. Since we're playing so many high-costed sticky threats, if our opponent does answer one of them, it means that our board is probably empty. Or at least if they answer the one we played the turn before. Our board's probably empty, which means Riko Kashimoto's effect will be live, and we can destroy whatever our opponent played, as well as dealing 3 to their face. 3 to face plus a stat line of 6/6, again, just lets us pressure our opponent super hard. Same thing we're trying to do with all of our cards here. And again, it's a 6 attack follower, which with 2 Cerberus pumps makes 10, which is our combo kill. 2 copies of Death's Breath. This serves 2 purposes in the deck. Purpose 1, well, it's always going to be bringing things back from our cemetery. But two reasons for that. 1, we can recur threats that we play once and get answered. 2, we're milling a lot early, hopefully, so if we mill over cards that we wanted to be playing, we can use Death's Breath to get those. Obviously, you do have to draw the Death's Breath for that to matter, but, you know, have to draw all your good cards at some point, right? This card works best with any of our just high-costed cards. We ideally want to be getting at least close to the 6 play points of value. But anything that has fanfare or can attack the turn it comes in is going to be best with this, which thankfully is basically all of our high-cost cards. So you can use this to bring back Olivia to loop her fanfare, Odile to loop hers, Dark Alice, Riko, and Alucard can all attack the turn they come in with either Rush or Storm. And if we have to bring back Azazel, which is like question mark, but still makes our opponent discard a card. Usually that's probably only going to happen if you mill over them early and have to use Death Breath to get one, period. But it does, interestingly, also... this is the one point where going first, you can still combo kill without Necro Charge on turn 7 if you play Dark Alice. Though I guess you probably won't have the Cerberus spells if you do that, so maybe not. Maybe you're still going to need Necro Charge somewhere, I guess. But you can Death's Breath into Azazel on 6 and still evolve, or on 7 and still evolve him, which you wouldn't be able to hard play him and evolve him unless you had Necro Charge. But really, it's just here to loop back anything that we milled or that died once. And it gives it Ward, which can help us stall out the game just a little longer if we need to hit a couple more times. Last card we have here, or not last card, last cost, 7 cost, top of our curve, we have Alucard. 7 cost 4/4, Storm, Necro Charge 10, gets +2 attack, which makes him hit that magic number of 6. Strike, deal 4 to an enemy follower, and give your leader +4 defense. A lot of lists don't play this card. I like this card as a one of. It's a cool Death's Breath target. It's cool just to jam from your hand for 7. It maybe seems a little underwhelming at first, but 7 play points for 6 to your opponent's face gain you 4. It's a 10 life differential, and it can remove something off your opponent's field. Worst case scenario, you play this and attack one of their followers, shoot a different follower for 4, so you get double removal, gain 4 defense. Which I think is still pretty relevant, like pretty reasonable for 7. So I think this card overall is pretty good. You just don't want to draw it early because it is kind of just the highest cost card in the deck. Our other 7-drop can reduce its cost, so it can brick, and that's why we only play 1. If this was just like my only top end, maybe you could justify playing 2 or 3, but we have so many other 6-drops and 5-drops that I don't want to brick on these that hard. Now our last card, and our main combo piece that's doing all the work for us. Azazel, 7-drop 6/6. Fanfare, each opponent discards a random card. The number of times I have lost a game to having to, 6-card hand, and my opponent randomly hits the one, card I had that wins me the game in hand, actually ridiculous. That effect will steal you games. He has Bane. I don't know how relevant that is. But Necro Charge 10 costs 3 less to play. Getting to Necro 10 by turn 4 is hard, but getting to Necro 10 on turn, say, 6 or 7, just so that you can play him and evolve him in the same turn a little earlier, is a lot more doable. And that makes this card super strong, because he evolves into a 7/7, which is big. Hard to remove. Very hard to remove. Still has Bane. on evolve, change each enemy leader's defense to 10. So this is why 6 is such an important number for us. And really 10 is the important number, but 6 plus 2 Cocos, which we can get from a single Cerberus. If we just play the Cerberus and evolve it, we can get 2 Cocos. That 4 attack pump on anything with 6 or more instantly kills our opponent when we evolve Azazel. So any of these followers, Soul Dealer, Odile, Dark Alice, Rico, or Alucard, most of those we can play before we ever evolve Azazel. If we play them and they don't get removed, we play Azazel, evolve, and instantly kill our opponent. Alucard probably comes down after Azazel. If you play Azazel on like 6 or 7 and evolve it, and then Alucard the next turn, you can kill them by pumping it. So this is kind of just the alternative win condition if we can't beat into our opponent enough damage early, if we have to use more of our resources on removal or just life gain and can't chunk our opponent's life, then this combo kill can just one-shot our opponent and take them out of the game. Some games you won't want to evolve Azazel at all. If you're able to just hit in for enough damage early, it's probably not... I mean, really, if they're already at like 10 life or lower by the time you get here, you're just not going to bother a lot of times. And that is possible because of how high a lot of our stat lines are. But in the games where your opponent's either gaining a lot of defense, this also makes it basically impossible for like heal-based decks to beat you. Because even if they heal up to like 30 or 40 defense, you evolve Azazel and they're back down to 10, and then you just kill them. So that's kind of our secondary win condition here, and why the 6 attack is such an important number. It is also, again, Odile with Azazel once we set them to 10. If we're able to get the Necro 20 effect to play Odile, burn 2, attack for 6, and get the strike effect to burn 2, that's 10 on its own. It's why that's super relevant. But again, Necro 20 is hard, so I don't know that that's happening, but it's an option. Overall, this card's just kind of nuts. He also himself, again, has 7 attack, so if we set them to 10 and they don't immediately remove him, we can just pump him and kill the opponent. Or, you know, attack with him and something else also does the job. So, looking at the deck as a whole, it's got some pros and some cons. Pros are obviously, the threats are hard for a lot of decks to remove. Even the decks that do have removal that deals 5 damage, it's going to be hard for them to answer multiple cards back to back to back that have 5 defense. And it's still going to be even harder for them to answer our 6 defense followers. We have high offensive stat lines. We have, as we've seen so many times, so many followers that can hit for 6 damage or more. And even just a lot that are hitting for 4 and 5 otherwise, or more with Cerberus pumping them with her spells. And Azazel presents constant combo kill pressure, where our opponent basically has to fear for their life anytime a follower lives on our board. They basically just can't let anything ever survive, because if we have the Cerberus spells, drawing Azazel means instant death for them. So that's all really good stuff about the deck. The cons are, it's very slow in the early game because of our Necrocharge setup requirements. If we're playing like turn 2 and 3, like Seeking the Pearl and Spartoy Sergeant, we're not really doing anything. We're not affecting our opponent's board. That means we can just lose before we get to our cool kill turns a lot of the time. And unfortunately, the higher curve that I mentioned at the beginning does lead to some inconsistent draws. This deck does have to draw the cards in the right order for it to work. If you draw all of your Dark Alices and Death's Breath and Ricos and Azazels in the first couple turns of the game instead of the last couple turns of the game, you're going to sit there doing nothing the whole time, and you're just going to die. So it has some inconsistencies that are why I'm a little iffy on this deck. Yeah, I'm doing the deck profile on it. I think it's probably the deck worth looking at for Abyss, but I still don't know that I would say it's worth playing competitively. At least not a version that I have optimized. Maybe some people out there can work some wonders with this and fix it up a little better than I can. But all I can offer is this and some options that I would consider putting in here. One of the reasons this was the last deck I covered is just because I really could not decide on 40 cards. And you'll see that here. There are a lot of other cards that I would consider. First off is Razor Claw. This can go in over Undying Resentment if you want. It's still 2 cost to 3 damage at quick timing. Instead of dealing or instead of milling the top card of your deck, is dealing 2 to your leader as a downside, but you get the upside of this being able to go to your opponent's leader instead of just a follower. That means that this can be a follow-up to Azazel Evolve alongside Azazel to attack for 7, and then burn them for 3 to get that 10 damage if they can't remove your Azazel. So that's another way to kill them. And it's another way to kind of round out a lot of your numbers. It also means that Soul Dealer plus Razor Claw can kill from 10. Evolved Soul Dealer, at least. It can do a lot of cool things like that by going to your opponent's leader's face. Unfortunately, paying 2 life for it is a real cost when we're trying to... like when we have cards in our deck specifically to gain us that defense back, we don't really want to be spending it willy-nilly. It is important to us to not just die in the early game. So I think there's trade-offs here. This is definitely the more aggressive option and the less sort of defensive setup option. Another more aggressive card, we have Spectre, 2-cost 2/1 Bane. You can pay 2 defense on Fanfare to gain Rush and put the top card of your deck into your Cemetery. So this does help us a little more with setting up Cemetery for Necrocharge effects and its removal. Bane plus Rush is a good combination to just take out any follower that's engaged on the opponent's board. Downside is it can't take out followers that are not engaged, which a lot of times, unfortunately, right now, followers come down and have a good fanfare effect, and then you need to remove them immediately before they hit you for 5 damage. So that's kind of why this isn't in here right now. I just don't think it's good enough at answering the big threats before they've done their job. So... next card we have is Hell's Unleasher. I really liked this in the decks prior to this set, where you had to kind of go all in on the combo kill. Because this was a good way to just buy back your Cerberuses and Soul Dealers and things like that. If you accidentally milled over them, because you're going a lot harder on milling to make sure you hit Necrocharge in time. You can still play this here, just to make sure, you know, if you play Spartoy Sergeant on turn 2 and you mill a Cerberus, you can play Hell's Unleasher and add it to your hand so you can play it on curve. It's just kind of like toolboxy. It's leaving your Necrocharge the same because it's going to Cemetery instead of the card you're taking out. And yeah, it's cool for that reason. Unfortunately, it just doesn't really fit the deck slots here. I think it's better in a deck that plays Necro Carnival, probably, since you can Necro Carnival to summon your Hell's Unleasher if you have to. But that's probably just a whole nother build entirely. Bone Chimera is another card that can help us set up Necrocharge. 3-cost 1/1 Fanfare, put the top 3 cards of your deck into Cemetery. This is the most mill you're going to get out of a single card right now. I think this card's actually just really good anyway. It gains Rush and Bane at Necrocharge 7. So, same upside as Spectre without having to pay the 2 defense. Downside is also the same as Spectre though, where it can't hit followers that are still refreshed. And I think that's kind of an issue right now. It's also hard to justify paying 3 play points for this, but we don't have much else going on 3 going first, so could still justify some slots maybe. Next we have Righteous Devil. I would consider this maybe over Soul Dealer. As I said, so I went on Soul Dealer a while about how it just doesn't have as many good targets right now in a lot of matchups. Righteous Devil can fix that a little bit. Specifically the Forest matchup. If your opponent puts a Beauty and the Beast on board, this deck has very few ways to deal with it, and Righteous Devil gives us a way to deal with it since this has Assail and Bane. Kind of acts like Shapeshifting Mage. It's going to cost us 4 play points and 3 defense, but if we trade into the Beauty and the Beast, we're at least dealing 1 damage to our opponent and gaining 1 of that defense back, so we only take 2. And against other decks, if you are able to sit this on the board and resolve it and just untap with it the next turn without having to trade it into anything, you can start using like the Cerberus spells and just your various kill spells to start gaining you defense and burning the opponent, and maybe that's worth it. Definitely something to consider, but not something I'm entirely sold on. Last other option I have here is Rice Shower. A 5-cost 3/5 with Ward, so again a defensive option for the deck. Fanfare, select an enemy follower, deal it 3 damage, put the top 2 cards of your deck into your Cemetery. This actually does do basically everything this deck wants to do. It wards, it deals damage to our opponent's followers, and it helps fill our Cemetery. The reason I don't have this in the list right now is that I don't think at this point in the game when you're playing a 5-drop that 3 damage is enough to really help you out that much. I think it's just too slow at the point that we want to be threatening our opponent a little more. It's only got 3 attack, and the 5 defense is still going to die to cards like Humpty Dumpty. So spending our turn playing this is just going to not feel great a lot of the times, I think, in this list at least. The last words effect is we can add an Uma Musume follower with a different name from Cemetery to our hand, so it can't add itself back. This is another effect that in our current list, unless you're adding like Maruzensky back or still have a carrot left to race Fine Motion, I don't think that's very good. Though getting Fine Motion back and being able to race it a second time to mill 2 more and gain 2 more life is like maybe fine. But I think this would be better in a deck that's playing more of the Uma Musume cards as a whole, such as Twin Turbo and Nice Nature, where you just kind of go all in on the Uma Abyss strategy and try to go for Twin Turbo's Storm effect as another way to kill your opponent. Since Twin Turbo can, you know, with Cerberus Pump, it doesn't get a 10, but it's a 2-drop that gets to like 7. You can play 2 of them in a turn and kill your opponent that way, which is, it's something. So I think that might be a little better strategy for the Rice Shower. So again, this is the deck as a whole. Like I said, a lot of tweaks that could be made. I'm not super sold on this. It's why it took me so long to get the Abyss video out compared to the others. I can't find something that feels great to me for Abyss. Maybe I'll look at the dedicated Ghost deck a little bit later. But as far as this strategy, I think these are some number of the cards you want to play in some combination. Let me know if you guys can figure out anything a bit more optimal for it. Again, here's the Evolve deck. Thank you for watching. I know I've been a bit rambly on this one. This one's like 10-15 minutes longer than most of the videos, but I really appreciate you sticking here and watching it. Like, subscribe, comment, etc. Let me know if you've played Abyss or figured anything out with it, because I am actually curious. I really like a lot of the cards here. I just, in my head, can't get them to work quite as well as I would like, unfortunately. So let me know. Let me know if there's any other decks you'd like to see as well. There should be some more videos for you to watch on the screen until then. And I'll see you next time.